Passing the Night at the General's Headquarters by Du Fu. Clear autumn at headquarters, wutong trees cold beside the well. I spend the night alone in the river city, burning my candle down. Sad bugle notes sound through the long night as I talk to myself. Glorious moon hanging in mid-sky, but who looks? The endless dust storm of troubles cuts off news and letters. The frontier passes are perilous, travel nearly impossible. I have already suffered 10 years of turmoil and hardships. Now I am forced to accept a perch on this one peaceful branch. So we continue with Du Fu's poems, and in the selection of the heptasyllabic poems of his, there are sometimes some interesting combinations. The two previous poems we read of Du Fu were about climbing places. This one and the next poem are about passing a night somewhere. Now, a little bit of a background for this poem. This poem was written presumably in 764. At this time, Du Fu was in the area of Shu, as he had been for quite some time, but he was facing a minor lucky streak in that an acquaintance of his, Jian Wu, who had worked with him at the secretariat or the chancellery, had just been named governor general of the area of Shu. And as the saying goes, dog doesn't bite dog. Scholar officials were generally quite protective of each other when they encountered themselves in foreign postings. And this is precisely what Jiang Wu did. He gave him a nominal position and a posting at the headquarters of his administration in Shu, which would have been a great bolster for self-esteem and morale for Du Fu, who had been quite a considerable number of years out of office and without being able to wear the appurtenances of official rank, and gaining therefore a certain measure of security in these troubled times. Now, as we've said before, Du Fu lived during his time at Shu. For most of it, he lived in a small cottage in a small thatched hut in the outskirts of Chengdu. So going to work at the general's headquarters, he would probably have, it was probably a relatively few hours long trip, which means that sometimes when he might have been working at the headquarters, and it suddenly was very late and maybe a cold night. So sometimes Du Fu might spend the night, instead of going home, sleeping at the offices, and that's precisely the scenario that is painted here. Probably Du Fu has been working till late, so he has decided to spend the night at the general's headquarters. He is alone, and he has brooding thoughts about the general situation of the country, the general situation he himself has been through, and the temporary respite that he is living right now, thanks to the generosity of the general. So, main topic of the poem, it's a descriptive poem describing the conditions of Du Fu. It fits partially with the subgenre of loneliness at night, because we have a non-sleeping Du Fu looking at the night sights and having some thoughts which, matching the season, which is autumn, are pretty melancholy, sad thoughts. But the poem ends with a happy note, so there's also this element of gratefulness to Governor Jiang Wu, which is very clearly present in the last couplet of this poem, which is unusually for a heptasyllabic Lushi, a parallelistic couplet. And the image which we'll comment when we talk about the couplets of the governor as a peaceful branch, is a pretty flattering depiction of his protector. Okay, then, so as we said, description of contemporary personal and national situations of slight turmoil and uncertainty, autumn melancholy, so this seasonal element, and gratefulness and patronage would be, the themes of this poem. So let's go, as usual, couplet by couplet. First couplet. Clear autumn at headquarters, wutong trees cold beside the well. I spent the night alone in the river city, burning my candle down. So as usual, the first couplet is, a creator of mood and setting. So it tells us when the action is taking place, at night, in autumn. It tells us where also, at the headquarters, in the river city. The image is one of loneliness. So it's an autumn night. It's pretty clear, so not cloudy. In the background, from where Du Fu might be sitting, there's probably a courtyard with a well and some wutong trees, which is a type of tree with very big leaves that I think is usually associated with rainy autumns in China because of the melancholy, sad thudding noise that the rain makes on the big leaves. So it's a cold night, it's autumn. The trees are there outside, next to a well, exposed to Du Fu's gaze, but probably to nobody else's gaze, as the general's headquarters have been abandoned. The poet is spending the night alone there. He's not sleeping, so his candle is kept alight, but is, slowly dwindling. Second couplet. So the second couplet continues this descriptive mode of the first one, but it focuses on more on the things in the background beyond the immediate settings of Du Fu. So the night and the surroundings in Chengdu. Sad bugle notes sound through the long night as I talk to myself. Glorious moon hanging in mid-sky, but who looks? So two sad melancholy images in the second couplet associated with this autumn night. There's an oral element, bugle notes. So bugle is a type of trumpet. Remember, we are at the general's headquarters, so there would have been a military garrison and night watches and sentinel posts, and there would have been some sound of military music. So there's this background from time to time, all through the long night, of sad music. There's also a beautiful moon in the sky, but the poet implies, who else apart from me is awake, looking at this beautiful, sad sight? Only the poet seems to be appreciating the bugle notes and the moon. In another translation, in the first, the line that has been translated as the poet talking to himself is rather translated as the sad bugle notes talking with themselves. So the image would be there of two beautiful elements in the night, the sound of the bugles, the beauty of the moon, that are carelessly or uselessly exhibiting their sound and their beauty as there's nowhere except Du Fu looking at them. In this interpretation, as I translated in this poem, that is true for the moonlight, but it's not so true for the bugle notes. They act as a sort of background sound and chorus for Du Fu's monologuing, for his maybe writing poetry, or for his speaking aloud his own thoughts on melancholy and sadness and about his preoccupations and worries. Third couplet. The third couplet again moves out. Remember the poem, and this happens a lot in Chinese poems and in Du Fu's poems as well. There is a zooming in or a zooming out. Here we've got a zooming out. So the first line was pretty descriptive of Du Fu's surroundings, the first couplet, sorry. The second one seems to be describing a more general geographical background at night. The third couplet moves on to the more historical and political background that goes beyond Chengdu and beyond the province of Shu to the times and place in the aftermath of the Anlushan rebellion that Du Fu is living through. The endless dust storm of troubles cuts off news and letters. The frontier passes are perilous, travel nearly impossible. So we're still in a situation of upheaval. Remember, this is 764, more than 8 years since the end of the Anlushan rebellion, but the end, at least the nominal end of the rebellion, has not brought peace. The east and the north are controlled by military warlords who only pay lip service to the emperor, and foreign pressure in the form of the Uyghurs and the Tibetans in the northwest are pushing rather relentlessly against the beleaguered frontiers of the Tang Empire, even managing to take the capital for a brief stint. So the dust of chaos, of troubles, of war still lingers. Communication is broken. Traveling is broken. The passes are closed or dangerous. So there's no way for Du Fu to receive satisfactory news from the outside, especially we would imagine news of imperial success and of familiar well-being for his relatives in the heartland. Finally, the last couplet focuses strictly, so now it changes all the zoom out into a zoom in again, and it focuses on Du Fu personally, so not on the landscape, not on the country, but on how Du Fu is feeling and what he might be thinking all through the night he is passing at the general's headquarters. I have already suffered 10 years of turmoil and hardship. Now I am forced to accept a perch on this one peaceful branch. So the poet tells us, he goes into the personal area. He says, 10 years have I suffered. He is rounding up the numbers. 10 is a rounder number than 8.5, which would have been the year since the Al-Lushan rebellion. And since then, Du Fu and the country have been suffering, but Du Fu specifically, after all, his distress at the capital and his sacking afterwards when the capital was retaken. 10 years of turmoil and hardship have piled up on top of Du Fu, turning his hairs white and crushing his soul ever so much. But now he finds a little respite. This is what the last line tells us, and it ends also with a bit of flattery to the general who is protecting him. Now I am forced to accept a perch on this one peaceful branch, in this one area of the empire where peace looms. Indirectly, it is said thanks to the good offices of Yang Wu. Here I accept this peaceful branch, this sinecure, this post at the local administration, and I am grateful and happy at being able to enjoy this surcease, temporary surcease of sorrow and an end, a temporary end to more damage, more suffering. So quite a nice poem, and very much in the style of Du Fu's juxtaposition in his poems of personal and national grief, and in this case of slight respite and satisfaction.